Everybody, it's Robyn and welcome to my channel. Today on the Robyn's Nest, we are going to be making this beautiful beach cake. It is going to have a very natural and rustic feel, and we're going to decorate it with all the beautiful things you would find combing the beach. Hope you guys like this one. Now let's get right into it. So for this cake, you are going to need 3 layers of your cake flavor of choosing. Today I'm just using a simple vanilla. We're going to begin by leveling out these layers so our cake stacks up nice and straight. And I also like to take that 3rd layer and flip it over and just trim that little bit of caramelization off, so that way none of that stuff shows through when it's time to slice the cake. So next, using a turntable and a 10-inch cake board, we're going to apply a small amount of buttercream to that board to act as a bit of a glue for that first layer of cake to stick to, and then we can proceed to stack and fill our layers. So using a piping bag, we're going to apply a nice thick layer of white American buttercream, and then using an offset spatula, we are going to smooth it out because you don't want to end up with any air bubbles in between. And you're going to do that for each of your layers until your cake is completely stacked, and then we are going to begin our crumb coat using that same white American buttercream. So starting at the top, I like to add a nice thin layer, and then that excess that builds up around the edges, I like to use that as a starting point to work my way down the sides. Now the reason for that is because sometimes when your cake is extra delicate because it's really moist, that top edge can be very fragile and can be downright tricky to frost without tearing. So by adding that layer on the top first, it really helps hold it all together when you're adding that side frosting. Now once my cake is completely covered, I like to grab my bench scraper and give it a quick once over just to even everything out, and then I pop it into the fridge to firm up while I work on some decorations, which we're going to start now. So beginning with my topper first, I'm rolling out a piece of gray fondant, which already has a little bit of Tylo powder added to it to help it dry. And then I'm going to use my stencil and lay that on top of the fondant, press it down, and that's going to leave an image behind. Now for those of you who haven't watched my videos before, you're probably thinking, what the heck? Well, I like to make my own stencils, and by doing so and cutting out all the little lines, it creates a perforation on the back side of the paper that when laid onto freshly rolled fondant leaves a perfect embossed image behind. So once I have my little anchor cut out, in order to turn it into a topper, we need to add some support inside. So I find the easiest way to do this without compromising your design is by sandwiching the toothpick in between 2 pieces of fondant, cutting the excess away, leaving us with our cool anchor design, which we are now going to set to the side to dry. So next up, we're just going to make some simple fondant rope to decorate our cake. So using a piece of light brown fondant, and you guys can use an extruder to save some time, but I've just rolled my fondant out extra thin, folded it over on itself, and then spun it around until it was nice and tight before giving it another final roll to secure it all together, and then trimming the edges to fray them out and make it look somewhat lifelike. So our first rope piece is done, which was quite easy, I must say, so it should be really easy to replicate in a larger version for the base of our cake. So using that same principle, I've just rolled out another piece of fondant extra long, doubled it over on itself, and twisted it up nice and tight, but be sure to measure, guys, because you don't want to come up short when you're decorating your cake. So next up, we're going to make some old wooden sticks to make it look like a piece of an old dilapidated wharf on the side of our cake. So to make the wood grain, I like to take a few different colors of fondant and sort of marbleize them together and then roll it out into a nice long log shape. And now I want this wood to look broken, so I'm cutting it to look a little bit jagged on the top side. And then I'm going to take the rope that I've made and we're going to wrap it around these pieces to make it look like a boat used to be tied there, or possibly an old fish trap, but the rope had weathered and it drifted out to sea. And I thought it would be fun to add a fancy little knot to this one to make it look a little bit more unique, and I think that looks pretty cool. What do you guys think? So that's it for those. I'm just going to make 2, but you guys can make more if you like, but I'm going to move on and make some little sea creatures to decorate our cake. So we're going to start off with some of these little horn-shaped shells, and these are really simple to make. You're going to take a piece of brown fondant, roll it into a long cone shape, and then twirl it up like a unicorn horn. And then I'm going to cut it off to the length I need and stick a big hole in the fat end. And voila! So you're just going to make a bunch of those, and then we're going to move on to some clamshells. So using a slightly darker shade of brown, I'm just tracing out the shape of our clamshell, and I'm also emphasizing the little grooves in the center as well. And now I'm going to take an X-Acto knife, cut out the outline, and then switch back to my Dresden tool and just refine the finer details a little bit. And also, once again, we're going to make quite a few of these so that way we have lots to go around our cake. And now we're going to make some standard little black snail shells, which are also super simple to make. We're going to make that little cone shape out of our fondant, twirl it up, trim it off, and then make a little hole in the chunky end of these ones as well. And once again, we are going to make quite a few of these before finishing off our decorations with some tiny little starfish. And I actually have a puncher for this, so it's super simple. And we're also going to add some little embellishments to these as well, because they have some texture to them, and I don't want them to just look flat and plain. I want them to look a little bit realistic. So I'm going to take my Dresden tool, and we're going to add a bunch of tiny little dots. And that's it, guys. I think they look great, and I cannot wait to see all this stuff on the cake. Well, that is it. We are completely done our decorations. Now all we have left to do is finish up the cake. So now we're going to go ahead and add that final layer of icing, and I'm using a very, very light blue, which has an ever so slight tint of green, so almost a sea foam green, if you will. And using my offset spatula, I'm just applying a nice thick, generous coat all over the entire cake and just sort of spreading it around, making sure it is nice and even and all the little holes are filled in. And once everything is completely covered, then I'm going to switch over to my favorite smoother, my metal bench scraper, and we are going to put a beautiful finish on this cake. So I'm going to keep going around and round until I'm happy with how it looks, and then we're going to clean up that top lip a little bit by holding it on approximately a 35-degree angle and carefully dragging inwards and lifting, pulling that little bit of buttercream away. And now I want you guys to go ahead and refrigerate your cake for about 15 to 20 minutes, because next up we're going to add some clouds to our cake, and you want that first layer of frosting to be set really well so you don't mess it up when we add these. So we're going to take a piping bag with some white buttercream, and I'm just going to add a few dabs here and there all over the cake, and then using a bench scraper, and you guys can use an offset spatula if you prefer, I'm just going to go around and around smoothing it out, and you can add a few more dabs if you like to layer them up a little bit, but I want it to look very subtle and natural to go with the rustic feel of our cake. And now we're going to pop our cake in the fridge once again to firm up before we add some little blue buttercream waves. And for these, as you guys can see, there's a few different shades of blue, and there's even a little strip of white too. So what I've done is actually marbled these colors in the bowl, and then using my small offset spatula, I'm just using little tiny strokes to brush them onto the cake to give the effect of waves crashing on the shore. And of course, our beach cake would not be complete without some little seagulls soaring over the sea. So using some little black lined folk art style seagulls, we're just going to paint them on with some food color in little clusters here and there all over the cake. And then we can finally finish everything off with all those fun little fondant decorations that we made. So starting with the rope for the base of our cake, I'm going to wrap it around and trim it off, and then using that excess, I'm going to make a little rope knot to mark the front of our cake. And now that we know where that's going to be, I'm going to take those little pillars that I created, and we're going to set those off to the side a little bit, and then we're going to take all those little seashells and starfish, and we're just going to put them sporadically all over the cake. And now once we have all of our little sea creatures in place, I'm going to take that anchor that we created, and I've actually entwined with a little piece of that rope that we made, and I'm going to place it right on the very top of our cake. And doesn't that look great, guys? But if you're anything like me and you love the beach as much as I do, I know you'll love this cake. Well, that's it for today's tutorial, guys. If you liked it, you know what to do. Leave us a thumbs up, a comment down below to let us know how much you love it, and hit that subscribe button too so you don't miss my next video. Thanks for watching, guys. See you on the next one.